Hi guys, Emiji here. I'm super excited because today we're going to be doing a sew along for my new spring patterns. So we have 9550 and 9551 and introducing extended sizing. So I'm super excited. Same pattern, but it does have a different number, so I don't want to confuse you guys. It is the same exact pattern. In this one, I chose to photograph me in the short one, and I photographed Aronica, which is my beautiful, sexy, confident, amazing model in the longer maxi. I am really excited about this because since I signed on as the VP of the Big Four last October, which I'm sure not everybody knows, I've been doing a lot to change certain things that you guys have been asking for, along with the entire team. They are all very eager to show you that we are listening and we are making these changes. So the extended sizing going up to a 34W is really great. We're going to be covering up to a 38W, which will be coming out very soon. And we're going to keep doing our very best to let you know that we're listening and we're trying to make all these changes. I'm also excited that we're doing finished garment measurements on the back of the envelopes, which is really important because for some reason we had finished garment measurements sometimes, and then they weren't always the ones that we needed. So now we have to have bust, waist, and hip on the back of that envelope so we know what pattern size we're cutting. And among those two things, I mean, we're doing a lot of things that you will start to see over time. Obviously, things take time, but we are working very hard. I know I'm working very hard. So this same intro will be in the next pattern. So the other pattern is 9539. My missus in the longer version, and then Aronica's is 9540, and I put her in the shorter version because hello legs, yes, she's so fly, I love her. I wanted to also point out that on the back of the envelopes, remember that you always have fabric recommendations along with any notions that you're gonna need. And of course, fabric yardage based on what size you're gonna be cutting. All right, let's get started. All right, so we're gonna need pattern 9539. Remember that the back of the pattern envelope always gives you fabric suggestions and yardage depending on the size that you're choosing. Let's go over the pattern pieces you need to cut. Now, I'm gonna do the short sleeve version of this dress, and I'm also doing the shorter version, but there is a cut line on the skirt. So if you wanna make it shorter, cut the shorter length. If you wanna keep it the longer length, then use that length. Also, since I am doing the shorter length sleeve, I will show you the difference between the using the cuff. So I will give you that example in a separate video of just the sleeve and the cuff. But in this sew along, I will be making the short version. It's getting warm here in Georgia. And so since I already have this beautiful yellow one with the long sleeve, I wanted to make it again for the sew along with the short sleeve. So if you are doing the long sleeve with the cuff, then you would need to cut pattern piece number 9. That's our cuff. You're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. And again, in another separate video, I will just show you how to attach the cuff to the sleeve. You're going to need pattern piece number 5. This is our collar, and you're going to cut 2 on the fold of fabric and 1 on the fold of interfacing. This is pattern piece number 6. You're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. This is the front facing. We also have a pocket. If you want to attach the pocket, then cut out pocket piece number 2. You're going to cut out 1. You're also going to need to cut out pattern piece number 3. This is the tie end, and you're going to cut 1. Again, because I'm doing the shorter sleeve, using pattern piece number 8, which is our sleeve, and you're going to cut 2, but I folded it here along the cutting line for view B. If you are doing the long sleeve with the cuff, then you would cut the entire sleeve. You're going to need to cut pattern piece number 1. This is our bodice front. You're going to cut 2. Make sure that you transfer your dart and also your dots for your pocket placement and your dot for your collar placement. We're also going to need pattern piece number 4. This is the bodice back, and you cut 1 on the fold. You're going to need pattern piece number 12. This is the skirt back. You're cutting 1 on the fold. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 11. This is the skirt left front. You're going to cut 1. And then you're going to cut out pattern piece number 10. This is the skirt right front, and you're going to cut 1. And then lastly, you're going to cut out pattern piece number 13 out of elastic. This is our elastic guide. The last little piece is pattern piece number 14, and this is cut out of twill tape. It's the tie that we're going to use on the inside to close our wrap. Now, once you have everything cut and all of the pieces that need to be interfaced, we can start sewing. So starting with our front bodice, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make your darts and you're going to stay stitch along the neckline. All right, on the left side, you should have marked 2 dots for your pocket placement. So let's go ahead and do our pocket. All right, we're gonna work on our pocket now. So I went ahead and turned and pressed a 1/4 inch at the very top. We have a fold line here. So what I want you to do is to right sides facing, you're gonna fold along that fold line, okay? And then if you need to, you can put a pin here. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna stitch, starting at the top, back stitching using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to pivot at the corner, pivot again at the corner, and work your way back up. Back stitching both at the beginning and at the end. Now you're going to turn your pocket corners out, and then you're going to press using your stitching line as a guide. Now once you turn your pocket right side out and you have pressed along your stitching lines, you can go ahead and stitch close to the edge. All right, go ahead and grab your left bodice. Okay, you're going to go ahead and align your pocket, making sure that each corner is at a dot. And you're going to go ahead and pin it in place. Okay, now you're going to head to your sewing machine and you're going to edge stitch around your pocket. All right, so we're going to go ahead and grab our tie end. We're going to do a narrow hem on this. So the easiest way that I like to do it is I do a stitching line. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I've done a stitching line 5/8 of an inch around my tie. And so what I do first is using that stitching line as a guide, I'm going to press in the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then after I press that in and it's nice and flat, then I turn under the cut edge to meet the folded edge. And then I press that in place. All right, I've gone ahead and pressed a narrow hem all the way around my tie. Now, if you have a narrow hem foot, which I actually do, but I know not everyone does, so I'm showing you this way, but if you have a narrow hem foot, it's so much easier. You could just feed the fabric right through the foot and it's much faster. But if you don't, then this is my favorite method to do it. Is I press the 5/8 of an inch, like I said, and then I bring that cut edge to the pressed edge, and then I just give it another press. Now you're gonna go ahead and stitch close to your edge. Okay, so still working on our left bodice, right, the side that we have our pocket on. We're gonna go ahead and with wrong side to right side, you're gonna place this where those dots are. Okay, just really quickly, head to your machine. You're just gonna stitch this down. Once you have your tie stitched down, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go ahead and sew our shoulders. So I'm gonna place both my fronts up facing me. And then with right sides facing, I'm gonna place my back on top and I'm gonna pin my shoulders. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and stitch our shoulders using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once we've got our shoulders sewn, we're gonna go ahead and stitch our collar. So let me set that aside for just a sec. You're gonna grab your interfaced piece and your non-interfaced piece, and we're gonna go ahead and pin. Okay, on the unnotched edge, we're gonna stitch up the sides, around, and then down the other side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. trim your seam allowance to 1/4 inch.
All right, we're going to turn our collar right side out. And you want to go ahead and give this a really good press. All right, go ahead and grab your bodice. We're going to go ahead and pin our collar to our bodice. So you can first start by aligning the notches that you have on your collar and on your center back. And you should also have a little dot here where your collar is going to end. So I'm going to place that there. Okay, now you're just going to go ahead and stitch down your collar using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now that we have our collar in place, we're going to go ahead and grab our facings. You're going to go ahead and place your facings over your front facings over your back facing. Make sure that you're matching up those notches, okay? And you're going to pin. Now you're going to stitch across the shoulders using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I went ahead and also serged around my facing and I pressed up 5/8 of an inch on the bottom. Now what we're going to do is we're going to attach this to our bodice. So with right sides facing, you're going to place your facing over the top. First match up your shoulder seams. You want to make sure that those are exactly in the same place. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and I like to start in the center and work my way down one side and then go back to the center and work my way back the other. We're going to stitch this down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you're done understitching, you can go ahead and press your facing to the inside. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and insert our sleeve. Now the instructions have you do this as an inset sleeve, but because this is a drop shoulder, it's relatively easy to attach flat because there isn't a whole lot of ease at the sleeve cap. So what I like to do is I'm going to pin my shoulder first, my shoulder dot to my shoulder seam. And then I'm going to match both of my notches because that's how I know my front to back. So I'm going to do my single notch for the front. And then the double notch to the back. Okay, once you have it pinned, you're going to pin your other sleeve the same way. We're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, go ahead and sew your other sleeve the same way. All right, once our sleeves are in, we can go ahead and close up the side seam. So I'm going to match my undersleeve seam first. I'm going to pin my side seam and then down my sleeve. You're going to pin your sleeve and your side seam, the other side seam the same way. Then we're going to go ahead and stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting at the hem, working our way up, pivoting at the sleeve, and working our way down. All right, once you've sewn your side seams, we can set this aside for just a minute because our bodice is almost done. And we're going to start working on putting together our skirt. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to stay stitch the upper edge of your skirt over and around the tie and then down just past the end of the tie, okay? Now you want to stay stitch that because you're going to have to do a narrow hem along this tie-in the way that we did the other tie-in that we attached to our bodice. So why don't you go ahead and do your stay stitching, and then we're going to go ahead and do the darts on the back of our skirt. Now while you're at your machine, go ahead and make the 2 darts that are on the back of your skirt, and then we're going to attach right front, left front to our back.
Back stitch at the beginning of your dart. You're gonna do your other darts on your skirt back the same way.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and lay our front to back at our side seams. So we have some side notches, some side seam notches, so you're gonna wanna place those. I'm gonna do this one side first, and you're gonna pin. Okay, you're gonna grab your other front and go ahead and pin. All right, you're gonna head to your sewing machine. Starting at the hem, you're gonna stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way up. You're gonna do the same thing for both your side seams.
Once we have attached our side seams, we're gonna go ahead and first finish off the hem of our skirt. So the hem allowance is 1.25 inches. So again, you can either serge and then fold up the full 1.25 inches, or you can press the 1.25 and then press under 1/4 inch for a really nice finish. And then you're gonna edge stitch. Okay, so I folded up. I'm using sort of a border print, and I'm trying to use this little orange part. So I already have a clean finish on my edge, so I'm gonna go ahead and just stitch on my right side. So I've gone ahead and finished my hem. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna finish off the sort of long tie end part. So very much like we did the tie piece before, where we used our stitching line to press our 5/8 of an inch and then bringing our cut line to that fold press line and pressing again to create our narrow hem. We're gonna be doing the same thing. You should have a little dot here that's on your pattern piece that you should have marked. This is where we're going to start our fold. Now for me, because I always find it easier, I went ahead and continued that stay stitching line that was at 5/8 of an inch all the way down the front. Because I'm gonna still use that guide, right? That stitching line as a guide. So I just made it easy on myself and I just continued the line all the way down. So just like we did before, go ahead and press the entire front side along that 5/8 of an inch stitching line all the way around your tie. And again, you're gonna stop at this dot. And then you're going to clip, before you start, go ahead and clip into that dot. Don't go past your stitching line, but just to the stitching line, because once this gets folded in, this part here gets attached to our bodice. All right, so as you can see, I have pressed my narrow hem all the way around my tie and down the front. I folded the very tip in so it's nice and neat, and I went ahead and put a little pin there just to keep it together. Now you want to do the same narrow hem along the other front. So again, do your stitching line 5/8 of an inch and continue to do your narrow hem. Okay, I'm going to start stitching close to the edge, but I'm going to stitch on my right side. Now I'm going to do my other side the same way. All right, so once we have our fronts finished, we're gonna go ahead and attach our bodice to our skirt. So I have my skirt right side up, and I'm gonna place my bodice right side's facing. I'm gonna pin first at my side seams. You wanna match up those side seams. And then I'll go ahead and pin in the middle. So we're gonna open up our facing, and the finished edge of my skirt, I'm gonna place right up against that seam. And make sure that your facing is open. Well, we're gonna close it after we stitch this together. Now on the other side, remember where I had you clip into your seam? So we're gonna go ahead and place the other side, open out your facing again, and I'm gonna place it right along that line. and I'm gonna pin. Once you have it all pinned, we can go ahead and stitch this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Remember to back stitch, and also remember to keep your facing open. All right, so now that we have our bodice stitched on, I want you to go ahead and press your seam allowance up towards the bodice so that we can go ahead and create the casing for the back elastic. Okay, so once you have pressed your seam up towards your bodice, you should have 2 notches. That's where we're gonna start and stop our casing. So what you're gonna do is you're going to stitch starting at one end and stopping at the other marking, 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge, okay, so the top edge, and we're gonna go ahead and create our casing. So I have placed a pin where I'm going to start and stop my casing stitching lines. I like to stitch so that my needle thread is at the top instead of sewing with the wrong side up facing me and the bobbin being visible on the right side of my fabric. I'm gonna back stitch to start. Awesome, now that we have our casing, I went ahead and cut a piece of elastic using my elastic guide. I have a much smaller safety pin here. And through one opening, you're gonna go ahead and insert your elastic. And you're just gonna work it through until you reach the other opening. Make sure you don't lose this end inside your casing. So pin it down or tack it down at your machine before you completely pull your elastic to the other side. Okay, once you've come out of the other end, you're gonna tack this down at your sewing machine. So I'm gonna pin it so that I don't lose it. Now at each marking, make sure that your elastic is just past it and you're going to stitch through all layers, making sure you catch the elastic on both ends. Okay, now that you have your elastic in place, what you're gonna do now is you're going to fold in your facing just like this. I'm gonna pin it in place, and then you can slip stitch this closed or you can stitch in the ditch. You're gonna do the same thing for both your facings. Bring them to the inside, just past your stitching line, either hand stitch it down or pin it and stitch in the ditch. All right, I've pinned my facing so that my pins are on the right side and I'm able to stitch in the ditch to make sure and catch the facing on the underside, and you can always feel it. That's why it's so good for you to press it and then place it and pin it just below the stitching line. So I've cut a piece of ribbon the size of pattern piece number 14. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna turn in 3/8 of an inch. And then you see you have a fold line here. So you're gonna mark that fold line and then you're gonna fold it over like this. And we're gonna stitch through all layers, okay? So I'm gonna first press my 3/8 of an inch. So once I have my 3/8 of an inch, I'm gonna go ahead and along this fold line, I'm gonna press again. We're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch up one side across the top and then down the other side. Now within this bounding box that we just made, you can go ahead and choose a small button that you're going to stitch to the left-hand side, and you can use that button as your guide to make your buttonhole. So you're gonna make a buttonhole right in this bounding box. All right, so your tie should look like this. Now I will give you another option. If for whatever reason you don't want to do a buttonhole, you can always attach a piece of thin ribbon to the front and then attach another piece of ribbon, sort of like you have on a robe, to the inside where we're going to be placing this tab. But instead of doing this, you would add just another piece of ribbon and then you would tie it on the inside, sort of like a robe again. But I did want to show you the way that it's instructed here. So this is going to get placed where the seam allowance is.
So this side is gonna get placed. This is the tie side, right? You can see this is the tie side. And with the buttonhole facing the front of the bodice, we're gonna go ahead and stitch this at the side seam. I'm gonna go ahead and put a pin to hold that in place. And you're just gonna go ahead and tack this down. And then on the left side, at the very front, you can go ahead and sew on a button. So that way when you wear it, this is gonna go sort of like this, and this ties. So now that our ribbon is in place and our buttonhole is made, so all you have left to do is to place your, sew on your button onto the left-hand side. And then of course, we still need to finish off the hem of your sleeve, and you're just gonna turn that under like we've done all the other hems, especially this hem here, the bottom hem. You're gonna turn this up, do a 1/4 inch, fold again, and give it a nice press. Then you're gonna stitch close to the edge. Once you're done with that, you are all done.